You might not realize it, but we're in an unprecedented time in the NBA right now. Despite what old head propaganda you might have seen online, the league has never had so many talented players capable of going off on any given night. And while basketball is without a doubt a team sport, there's no denying that to some degree, it is a star-driven league. Now, in such a crowded environment, how can certain players rise above the rest and carve legacies for themselves that will be remembered far past their playing days? The answer is with titles. Now, I'm not one of those toxic fans that thinks rings are the only things that can define a player, but we do have to admit, they must matter for something, right? Take a look at Giannis and Jokic, for example, whose rings solidified them both as the best players in the world after their respective runs, silencing all doubters that said they couldn't get it done. Or Curry in 2022, who vaulted himself into top 10 all-time and GOAT point guard discussions after securing himself a highly coveted Finals MVP. As much as we hate to admit it sometimes, rings write legacies. And heading into the 2024-25 season, we're going to look at what a title would mean for every star's legacy in the NBA. Starting with our reigning NBA champions, the Boston Celtics, led by Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. God, that still pains me to say, but before we jump into it, feel free to like and subscribe for some more NBA content this season. Now, remember when I said winning titles helped Jokic and Giannis ascend to greatness in our eyes? That didn't exactly happen this year. Instead, Jason Tatum got clowned for trying to give himself fake aura. We did it! And Jaylen Brown got some respect for winning a well-deserved Finals MVP before he had to watch all of his colleagues go to Paris 2024 without him. Speaking of Paris, Tatum then had to go through another round of memes thanks to Steve Kerr leaving him to raw on the bench for practically the entire US gold medal run. Not the greatest look for his aura aspirations fresh off of an NBA championship. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but unfortunately for these two, going through an injury-riddled Eastern Conference on their stacked team before beating the Mavericks, who probably weren't truly ready yet to win a title, wasn't quite enough to silence all the haters. Now if they were to win again, we could really be talking. Back-to-back titles would solidify the Jason-Jaylen era as a resounding success for Boston, and the two homegrown heroes would forever be remembered fondly for it, even if real ones know Derek White deserves the credit. Now I do think there is one reality where Tatum's legacy is actually somewhat diminished even if he won a title next year, which I know sounds crazy to say, but if Jaylen Brown were to win another Finals MVP ahead of him, how could we still look at Tatum as the leader of this Boston era? I think it would make for some great drama, though I do think it's highly unlikely Tatum doesn't get the award this time if Boston were to win again. But anyway, I hate this reality where Boston wins, so let's swiftly move on to the other finalists of last season, the Dallas Mavericks, led by none other than Luka Doncic. Luka's 2023-24 season was nearly perfect. His monster play during the regular season with eye-popping stat lines every single night led to a huge MVP campaign, with many NBA fans believing he actually deserved the award over Nikola Jokic. He then backed his regular season up by leading the Mavs to an improbable run to the NBA Finals, going through a loaded Western Conference along the way. Many fans now believe Luka is already the best player in the NBA, and while I'd still probably have the other Eastern European ahead of him, Luka winning a title next year would probably surely give him the crown. In my opinion, Luka has even more on the line than that though, because to me, of all the young stars in the NBA, outside of, maybe that Wembanyama guy, Luka's probably the only one with a realistic chance of getting into some of these top 10, top 20 all-time lists. He has the talent to do so, he's really that good, but it's only going to happen if he starts winning titles. With the league experiencing as much parity as it has in recent years, the pressure is only rising for Dallas and Luka to start making it happen sooner rather than later. While we're on the Mavs, I need to talk about Kyrie Irving as well, who, after some turbulent seasons to say the least, hit a resurgence in his career after playing a highly efficient and more importantly drama-free number 2 role in Dallas. And while he's never going to win a chip as the face of a franchise, winning his second title next to Luka in a similar manner he did next to LeBron in 2016 would plant him as one of the best supporting stars of our time, probably firmly giving him the edge over contemporaries such as Damian Lillard and Russell Westbrook. Next, let's talk about some vets in our league, starting off with Kevin Durant, whose career since leaving Golden State has left a lot to be desired. Beyond that epic battle versus the Bucks in 2021, his postseasons overall have been a huge disappointment to me. To make matters worse, while he was busy getting swept out of Brooklyn, Steph Curry and the Warriors were able to prove once again that they can win without him, and it's looking increasingly unlikely that KD will ever get the chance to say the opposite. While his all-time talent is undeniable and no one can take that away from him, those Finals MVPs with the Warriors just did not mean as much to fans as he thought they would, and winning a title outside of the Bay Area is really the only way for him to finally stomp out those haters once and for all. Given his big age though, I don't know if I can see it happening. Speaking of the Bay Area, had Steph not won that chip in 2022, this section would be very different, but after he finally got his first Finals MVP, he's kind of playing with house money at this point. He does still have room to climb all time though, and another title this late into his career would probably firmly secure his top 10 status and make the Magic versus Steph GOAT point guard debates even more heated than they already are. Speaking of GOATs, if LeBron James won a title in year 22 with his son on the roster, let's be honest, he probably still wouldn't be the undisputed GOAT, but I do think there'd be zero credible argument against him having the greatest basketball career of all time, just given the sheer volume of greatness from him, and oh my god, that documentary would hit like crack. Realistically though, the only chance of this actually happening is if the other superstar in LA, Anthony Davis, is to have a phenomenal season. And I think AD's legacy is impacted pretty differently depending on how the Lakers are to win this hypothetical chip. If LA wins with Davis as the clear number one option, it would obviously be a huge boost to his career, probably putting him back to best in the world conversations that we were told he's going to be a part of soon when he originally signed in LA. But let's say the Lakers win with LeBron carrying more of the load. What does that really say about AD if he's shown as a clear number 2 to a 40-year-old LeBron James while in the prime of his career? It would certainly place him a notch below our next two stars, also in their primes, Nikola Jokic and Giannis Antetokounmpo. I'm grouping these two European giants together because I think their narratives are pretty much exactly the same at this point. They're both currently in their prime with very similar careers and accolades while both playing for the teams that drafted them. They're also already both an elite company. Here's a chart showing every player in NBA history with an MVP and a finals MVP. Not many get to the point that these two are already at, especially with what should still be long careers left ahead of them. I know Jokic really could care less, but the time is now if they want to climb up these lists even further by continuing to win titles, as there's plenty of young stars on the come up, including this alien from France whose time to take over the league could happen right before we know it. Let's be honest though, we all know the 7-footer with the most pressure to win next year isn't Jokic or Giannis. It's by far Joel Embiid. It's starting to feel like it's now or never for the Cameroonian big man, who has had some untimely injuries, I know, but he's also had multiple playoff runs surrounded by different stars and quality teams around him without even making it past the second round, let alone talking about a ring. I could not believe this, but Joel Embiid is going to be 31 years old before next season's finals. And beyond that sympathy MVP because people were bored with Jokic, what does he really have to show for it given his incredible talent at his size? Embiid has the opportunity to join guys like Jokic and Giannis as an all-time great, but the time for him to do so is running out faster than we think. With yet another new sidekick at his side in the name of Paul George, is this the year Embiid finally puts together a run? Only time will tell. Speaking of Paul George, he's part of this next group of 3 guys I'm including together as their stories aren't identical, but they do have a lot of similarities. Paul George, James Harden, and Damian Lillard have all had their fair goes at leading their team to a championship, only to fall short at the conference finals. While they won't get those opportunities again, they found themselves in similar supporting roles at the later stages of their careers, with what seems like one last chance to contribute heavily to a title push as the league continues to get younger all around them. Next up, I have 2 more guys I'm putting together, even though it might not make much sense at first, but just hear me out. Kawhi Leonard and Jimmy Butler. Now, just like it was with the previous 3 players, I'm not trying to insinuate that these two have the same rankings all time or anything like that. It's just that they have certain similarities in how unorthodox their careers have been and how things get very confusing if either of them win a ring. We'll start with Kawhi Leonard, who is already one of only 12 players ever with 2 finals MVPs and one of only 3 to do so on 2 different teams. Winning another one with the Clippers would put him right there with LeBron as the only 2 players to ever do so on 3 different teams, despite him having less career points than Andrew Wiggins and Tobias Harris. He's already probably one of the most difficult players to rank all time as his talent is so clearly elite, but his career has been plagued with more unavailability than any other all-time great. Another ring would only add to this confusion, but it would surely put him at an even higher level all-time as one of the best to ever do it, when healthy of course, which is an asterisk that will forever follow him for the rest of his career. Now, the Jimmy Butler story to me is pretty similar, it's just on a lesser tier of greatness. Heading to Miami after his time with the Sixers felt very questionable at the time, and while he doesn't have a ring to show for it, the streets will never forget those 2 finals runs with the Heat that certified him as an absolute dog and one of the elite players of this generation, despite him lacking some huge counting stats in the regular season or numerous accolades compared to his peers. For example, he has 0 first-team All-NBA selections to his name, which is pretty surprising. I'm sure there are some haters who don't buy into this elite playoff riser agenda, but if he somehow won a ring with this Miami team, it would be practically impossible to argue, and those who don't care about the regular season could make a really compelling case that Jimmy Butler is one of the best of our generation. Finally, I'm putting in all the young stars not named Luka Doncic that have a chance of winning a ring this year. That means not you guys. I'm talking about SGA, Jalen Brunson, Anthony Edwards, Donovan Mitchell, Tyrese Halliburton, De'Aaron Fox, Paulo Banchero, Zion Williamson, John Morant, and I'm putting Devin Booker here too, which I know seems stupid because he's 27, but he doesn't deserve his own section, and mostly everything I say here applies to him too. Now, the reason Luka is separated from these guys is that unlike his case, none of these guys have the body of work to really be considered the best player of the league just quite yet, even with a championship next season, but a ring from any of them would really cement the changing times we've been seeing in the NBA from old to new. Do I think it's really likely for any of them next year? No, probably not, although Shea and Brunson in particular do have a very real opportunity. Adam Silver is desperate for some new superstars in the NBA, as our heroes of the 2010s are fading off into the twilight. And while I'm not trying to say these guys are like low-key or anything like that, their names are still not as recognizable to the wider mainstream public compared to our old superstars. And maybe next year is finally the time for that to start to change. Now, before we end off, let's have some fun and talk about Victor Wembanyama for a second. Do I really think this has a chance of happening next year? No, not really. But many truly believe we're looking at the next potential GOAT in the young Frenchman. And what else is a GOAT if not someone who defies all expectations that we set for them and does something we've never seen before? I do also love the new pairing with Chris Paul, who has been 4 years clean since his addiction of playing in the NBA Finals. And this might be the last chance for him to relapse before he retires and joins State Farm full-time. Realistically though, the Spurs aren't going to have the roster to put around Wemby to compete for championships championships just yet, but they better start executing some plans soon because I truly believe he's ready for the brightest light sooner rather than later. Okay, and there we have it, my personal takes on what every star has on the table heading into next season, and it's only a matter of time now until we see which one of these hypotheticals turn into a reality, even though I'm hoping none of them come true and the real GOAT, Scotty Barnes, carries my Toronto Raptors into the promised land. But anyway, let me know in the comments down below if I missed anyone or which one of my takes sucked. If not, feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and other than that, I will see you next time.